The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning when the October frost still clung to the window panes of the small boarding house in Cedar Falls. Samuel Hartwell held the envelope with hands that trembled not from the cold, but from the familiar weight of impending rejection. His left leg, twisted and shortened from a cavalry charge gone wrong 3 years past, ached as he shifted in the wooden chair by the window. The morning light caught the careful script of his name across the cream-colored paper, and he knew without opening it what lay within. Another refusal. Another woman who had seemed interested in correspondence until she learned the truth about his condition. Another dream of companionship and family crumbling to dust before it could take root. As morning light streams into this story of hope and heartbreak, I find myself wondering where in the world you might be listening from right now. Are you watching the sunrise like Samuel, or perhaps settling in for the evening? I'd love to know what time it is in your corner of the world as we begin this journey together. Samuel had been honest in his letters, perhaps too honest. He had described his war injury, his shortened leg, the way he walked with a pronounced limp that marked him as different in a world that demanded physical perfection from its men. He had thought honesty would serve him better than deception, but each returned letter proved him wrong. The women wanted strong men, whole men, men who could work a farm from sunrise to sunset without pause or pain. He opened the letter with steady fingers, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Miss Catherine Brennan of St. Louis had seemed different in her previous correspondence. Her letters spoke of books and dreams, of wanting a kind man rather than merely a prosperous one. She had written about her love of poetry and her hope to find someone who valued conversation as much as physical labor. For 6 weeks, their letters had crossed the country, carrying hopes and careful revelations. The words blurred before his eyes as he read. Regret, changed circumstances, best wishes for his future happiness. All the polite phrases that meant the same crushing thing. She had found someone else, someone whole, someone worthy of the future she envisioned. Samuel folded the letter carefully and placed it atop the growing pile in his desk drawer. 7 rejections now, each one a small death of possibility. The other men in town who sought mail-order brides spoke of their success, their upcoming weddings, their plans for families. Samuel listened to their stories with careful attention, nodding and offering congratulations while his own hopes withered like autumn leaves. The boarding house around him buzzed with the ordinary sounds of morning. Mrs. Patterson hummed as she prepared breakfast downstairs, her voice carrying the melody of an old hymn. Other residents moved through the hallways, their footsteps quick and purposeful. Samuel envied their certainty, their ability to move through the world without question or hesitation. He dressed slowly, favoring his injured leg as he pulled on his boots. The leather was worn but well maintained, like everything else he owned. His war pension provided enough for simple lodging and basic necessities, but not enough for the kind of prosperity that might overcome his physical shortcomings in a woman's estimation. He was neither wealthy enough to be overlooked for his disability nor charming enough to be accepted despite it. Downstairs, Mrs. Patterson served him breakfast with her usual maternal fussing. She was a widow herself, understanding the loneliness that could settle into a person's bones like winter cold. She never asked about his letters, but he saw the sympathy in her eyes each time another envelope arrived bearing disappointment. The day stretched ahead of him with its familiar routine. He would walk to the general store where Mr. Morrison employed him as a bookkeeper, his neat handwriting and careful mathematics making up for what his body could not provide. The work suited him, required his mind rather than his strength, but it was solitary labor that offered little chance for the human connection he craved. Samuel made his way down Main Street, his walking stick tapping a steady rhythm against the wooden sidewalk. Other men nodded politely but rarely stopped to talk. He was respected but not included, accepted but not embraced. The war had taken more than the full use of his leg. It had somehow taken his place in the community of whole men who planned futures and built families. At Morrison's general store, he settled into his desk in the back room, surrounded by ledgers and invoices that demanded precision but offered no companionship. The numbers were honest, at least. They did not judge or reject. They simply required accuracy and patience, qualities he possessed in abundance. As the morning progressed, Samuel found his thoughts returning to the letter, to the careful words of rejection that had become so familiar. He wondered if he was foolish to continue hoping, to keep writing letters to women who would inevitably discover his inadequacy. Perhaps it was time to accept that some dreams were not meant for men like him, men whose bodies bore the visible scars of service and sacrifice. But even as he considered abandoning his search for companionship, something deep within him rebelled against surrender. He had survived Confederate bullets and Union hospitals, had learned to walk again when the doctors said it was impossible. Surely he could survive the rejection of women who could not see past his limitations to the man he remained beneath them. The afternoon brought new correspondence to the general store, and Samuel watched through the window as the mail coach arrived. Somewhere in the country, another letter might be waiting, another chance at connection and understanding. Tomorrow he would write again, would offer his heart to another stranger who might see something worth keeping in his careful words and honest confession. Evening approached with its promise of solitude and reflection, but also with the possibility that tomorrow might bring different news, a different response, a different future than the one that seemed so certain in this moment of fresh disappointment. 3 days later, as Samuel sorted through the morning mail delivery at Morrison's store, an envelope bearing unfamiliar handwriting caught his attention. The paper was simple, not the fine stationery he had grown accustomed to receiving from prospective brides, and the address was written in a careful script that spoke of education despite its humble materials. Miss Eleanor Whitmore of Independence, Missouri. The name meant nothing to him, yet something about the letter felt different from the others that had arrived over the months. Perhaps it was the weight of it, suggesting more than a brief note of introduction, or perhaps it was simply the hope that refused to die despite repeated disappointment. Samuel waited until his lunch break to open the letter, carrying it to the small park behind the store where a wooden bench sat beneath an aging oak tree. His fingers worked carefully at the seal, mindful not to tear the paper that might contain his next heartbreak or his unexpected salvation. The letter was longer than most, written in that same careful hand across 3 full pages. Miss Whitmore began with an apology for the delayed response to his advertisement, explaining that she had been caring for her ailing grandmother and managing the family's small farm alone since her grandfather's death the previous spring. She wrote of loneliness, not the romantic kind that filled most correspondence, but the deeper isolation that came from carrying burdens meant for 2 people. Her words spoke of early mornings feeding chickens and late nights mending clothes by lamplight, of a life measured in necessary tasks rather than chosen pleasures. Samuel found himself drawn into her narrative, recognizing something familiar in her description of solitude. She did not mention his disclosed injury directly, but neither did she ignore it. Instead, she wrote about her grandfather, who had lost his right arm in a farming accident, but continued to work their land with determination and ingenuity that inspired rather than diminished him. Strength, she observed, came in many forms, and the most valuable kind often grew from overcoming adversity rather than avoiding it. A man who had faced hardship and emerged with his character intact was worth more than 10 who had never tested their resolve against genuine challenge. The letter revealed a woman of 24 years, neither young enough to be naive nor old enough to be desperate. She had received proposals from local men, she admitted, but found them lacking in qualities she valued above physical prowess or financial security. She wanted partnership, not protection, and conversation that extended beyond weather and livestock prices. Her honesty was refreshing and terrifying in equal measure. She wrote about her own limitations with the same straightforward manner he had used in describing his injury. She was, she confessed, considered too independent by most men's standards, too inclined toward books and ideas when she should focus on domestic perfection. Her cooking was adequate but uninspired, her sewing functional rather than beautiful, her temperament more suited to debate than deference. Samuel read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his vest pocket. For the first time in months, he felt something other than resignation when contemplating correspondence. Eleanor Whitmore wrote like someone who understood that life's challenges created character rather than destroyed it, that imperfection might be more interesting than the flawless facades most people presented to the world. That evening, he began his response by lamplight in his boarding house room. Usually, his letters were careful exercises in presenting his best qualities while honestly acknowledging his limitations. This time, he found himself writing more naturally, responding to Eleanor's observations about strength and partnership with thoughts he had never shared with previous correspondents. He wrote about the war, not just his injury but the camaraderie he had discovered among men who faced uncertainty together. He described the satisfaction of his bookkeeping work, the precision required and the quiet pride he took in maintaining perfect records that helped local businesses thrive. He admitted to his love of reading, spending evenings with books that transported him beyond the limitations of his physical world. Most importantly, He wrote about his dreams for a different kind of marriage than the traditional arrangements he observed around him. He wanted a partner who would value his mind as much as his heart, someone who would find satisfaction in building something meaningful together rather than simply fulfilling expected roles. Eleanor's reply arrived 2 weeks later, carried by the same mail coach that had brought so many disappointments before it. Samuel recognized her handwriting immediately and felt his pulse quicken as he carried the letter to his usual bench beneath the oak tree. The October air had grown sharper, and the leaves above him rustled with the promise of winter's approach. She had received his letter with what she called grateful surprise. His honesty about his dreams for partnership had resonated with her own hopes for marriage that transcended the typical arrangements she witnessed around her. Too many unions, she observed, seemed built on convenience rather than genuine connection, leaving both parties lonelier than they had been before committing to share their lives. Eleanor wrote about her daily routine with the same careful detail he had used to describe his work. She rose before dawn to tend the chickens and milk their single cow, prepared simple meals from their garden's harvest, and spent evenings reading by the fire when her tasks were complete. Her grandfather's books remained in their small parlor, volumes on philosophy and history that she treasured more than jewelry or fine clothes. The farm was small but productive, she explained, sufficient to support one person comfortably, but requiring more labor than she could manage alone as winter approached. She needed help with repairs to the barn roof and firewood cutting, tasks that demanded strength she did not possess. But more than practical assistance, she craved intellectual companionship, someone who would appreciate her thoughts as much as her domestic contributions. Samuel found himself smiling as he read her description of attempting to fix a broken fence post, struggling with tools too heavy for her hands while her grandmother offered contradictory advice from the porch. Eleanor's writing revealed a woman who approached challenges with determination and humor, qualities that drew him more powerfully than conventional beauty or accomplished homemaking skills. She asked about his injury with delicate directness, not from morbid curiosity but from genuine concern for his comfort and capabilities. Her grandfather's missing arm had never defined him in her eyes, she wrote, though she had watched him adapt his methods to accommodate his limitation. She wondered if Samuel had discovered similar innovations, ways of accomplishing tasks that others might assume impossible for someone with his condition. The question touched something deep within Samuel's heart. Most people either ignored his disability entirely or focused on it to the exclusion of everything else about him. Eleanor seemed genuinely interested in understanding how he navigated the world, not to judge his adequacy but to better know the man she was considering as a potential husband. He began his response that very evening, writing by the steady light of his lamp while Mrs. Patterson's household settled into nighttime quiet around him. He described the techniques he had developed for managing his bookkeeping work despite periods when his leg caused him significant pain, the way he had learned to pace his activities to maintain productivity without aggravating his injury. More importantly, he wrote about the mental strength he had discovered within himself, the determination that had carried him through months of recovery and the daily challenges that others took for granted. His disability had taught him patience and creativity, forcing him to find solutions that might never have occurred to someone who relied solely on physical capability. Samuel shared his observations about the different kinds of courage he had witnessed, both during the war and in the years since. The most impressive bravery, he had concluded, belonged not to those who faced danger without fear, but to those who acknowledged their fear and chose to act despite it. He had learned that true strength often wore quiet faces and spoke in gentle voices rather than announcing itself with loud demonstrations. As he sealed the letter, Samuel realized that something fundamental had shifted in his approach to this correspondence. Previous exchanges had felt like careful negotiations, attempts to present himself as acceptably damaged rather than truly broken. With Eleanor, he found himself writing as though to a friend who might understand the complexity of living with limitations while refusing to be defined by them. The letter carrier would not return for 3 days, but Samuel felt no impatience as he placed the envelope on his desk. For the first time since beginning his search for a wife, he felt genuinely hopeful that he might have found someone who could see past his injury to the man he remained beneath it, someone who valued qualities that his disability had actually strengthened rather than diminished. Winter was approaching Cedar Falls with its promise of long nights and cold mornings, but Samuel no longer dreaded the season's isolation. Eleanor's letters had brought a warmth that no fire could provide, the precious possibility of understanding and acceptance from someone who knew exactly what she would be choosing if she chose him. 3 letters had passed between them when Eleanor wrote the words that changed everything. She was coming to Cedar Falls. Her grandmother had passed peacefully in her sleep, leaving Eleanor alone on the farm with winter approaching and decisions that could not wait for lengthy correspondence to resolve. Samuel read the letter twice before the full meaning settled into his mind. She would arrive on the Thursday train, she wrote, with a single trunk containing her most precious belongings and enough money to return to Missouri if their meeting proved disappointing to either party. She proposed a trial period of 1 month, during which they could determine whether their written connection translated to genuine compatibility in person. The honesty of her approach both thrilled and terrified him. Eleanor was not arriving as a committed bride, but as a woman willing to take a calculated risk on a man she had never seen. She understood that physical presence might reveal incompatibilities that letters could not convey, and she was prepared for that possibility even as she hoped for something better. Samuel found himself pacing his small room that evening, his walking stick tapping an agitated rhythm against the wooden floor. Mrs. Patterson had offered to prepare the spare room for Eleanor's stay, her maternal instincts recognizing the significance of this arrangement even when Samuel had struggled to explain it himself. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with November wind rattling the windows of the boarding house as Samuel prepared to meet the train. He had chosen his best suit, brushed to perfection despite its age, and polished his boots until they gleamed. His walking stick was freshly oiled, its carved handle worn smooth by years of use but still elegant in its simplicity. The train station bustled with its usual activity as the morning passenger service approached Cedar Falls. Samuel positioned himself near the platform where he could observe arriving passengers without appearing too eager or desperate. His heart hammered against his ribs as steam hissed from the great locomotive and the conductor called out their destination. Eleanor emerged from the third car, a woman of medium height wearing a dark blue traveling dress that spoke of practicality rather than fashion. Her brown hair was arranged simply beneath a modest hat, and she carried herself with the confident posture of someone accustomed to managing her own affairs. She was not beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about her direct gaze and the way she surveyed her new surroundings with obvious intelligence. Samuel approached slowly, his limp more pronounced due to nervousness and the cold morning air. He had rehearsed his introduction countless times, but the words seemed to desert him as he drew near enough to speak. Eleanor solved his dilemma by stepping forward with a smile that transformed her serious face into something genuinely warm. "Miss Whitmore," he managed, his voice steadier than he had expected. She extended her hand in greeting, her grip firm and honest like everything else about her. "Samuel Hartwell," he continued, finding his composure as her eyes met his without flinching or showing the pity he had learned to expect from strangers who noticed his condition. The baggage porter retrieved Eleanor's trunk, a sturdy piece that had obviously seen considerable use but remained well-maintained. Samuel insisted on hiring a wagon to transport both Eleanor and her belongings to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, knowing that the walk would be difficult for him while carrying additional weight. During the short ride, Eleanor observed the town with the same careful attention she had brought to everything else in Samuel's experience of her. She asked practical questions about the climate, the availability of supplies, and the character of the local residents. Her inquiries revealed a mind that approached new situations systematically rather than romantically. Mrs. Patterson welcomed Eleanor with the elaborate courtesy she reserved for special occasions, showing her to the prepared room and offering refreshments after her journey. The landlady's approval was evident in her bustling attention to Eleanor's comfort, and Samuel felt grateful for this implicit endorsement of his choice. That evening, they sat together in Mrs. Patterson's parlor while she prepared dinner in the kitchen. Eleanor had changed from her traveling clothes into a simple brown dress that complemented her coloring without attempting to disguise her practical nature. She asked Samuel about his work, his daily routine, and his expectations for their arrangement with the same directness that had characterized her letters. Samuel found himself responding more naturally than he had anticipated. Eleanor's presence was calming rather than intimidating, her questions born of genuine interest rather than judgment. When she asked about his injury, he explained the circumstances of his wounding and subsequent recovery without the defensive tone that usually crept into such discussions. She listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful rather than pitying. When he finished, she nodded as though he had confirmed something she already understood. Her grandfather, she said, had taught her that a person's response to adversity revealed more about their character than their response to success. Samuel had clearly chosen to meet his challenges with dignity and determination, qualities she valued above any physical capability. The first week of Eleanor's stay passed with the careful politeness of two people learning to navigate shared space and uncertain futures. She accompanied Samuel to Morrison's general store each morning, observing his work with genuine interest while helping Mrs. Morrison organize inventory in ways that revealed her practical intelligence. Samuel discovered that Eleanor possessed an intuitive understanding of numbers that complemented his methodical approach to bookkeeping. She could spot patterns in sales records that helped predict seasonal demands, insights that impressed both Samuel and Mr. Morrison with their accuracy and usefulness. During their evening walks around town, despite the November chill that made Samuel's leg ache more than usual, Eleanor asked thoughtful questions about the community they might join together. She wanted to understand the social dynamics, the unspoken rules that governed relationships between neighbors, and the expectations that would be placed upon them as a married couple. As we follow Eleanor and Samuel through these quiet streets where frost sparkles under lamplight, I'm curious about the evening settling in where you are right now. Whether you're listening during your morning coffee or winding down after a long day, I'd love to know what part of the world you're experiencing this story from and what time it is in your corner of our globe. The townspeople regarded Eleanor with polite curiosity mixed with obvious speculation about Samuel's prospects. Some seemed genuinely pleased that the quiet bookkeeper might have found companionship, while others appeared skeptical that any respectable woman would willingly attach herself to a man with his limitations. Eleanor handled their scrutiny with grace that impressed Samuel more each day. When Mrs. Carmichael made pointed comments about the challenges of caring for an invalid husband, Eleanor responded that she had nursed her grandparents through their final illnesses and found great satisfaction in being useful to people she cared about. Her tone suggested that she considered Samuel's injury a manageable inconvenience rather than a defining tragedy. At the general store, Eleanor's competence with figures and organization quickly made her indispensable to the daily operations. Mr. Morrison, initially uncertain about employing a woman even temporarily, soon relied on her suggestions for improving efficiency and reducing waste. Her practical innovations saved both time and money, earning her a respect that extended beyond politeness. Samuel watched Eleanor integrate herself into his world with a mixture of admiration and growing affection. She approached each challenge with the same methodical intelligence she had shown in her letters, but he was discovering layers of warmth and humor that written words had only hinted at. Her laugh, when something genuinely amused her, was rich and unguarded in a way that made him want to earn the sound as often as possible. Their conversations in Mrs. Patterson's parlor grew longer each evening as comfort replaced formality between them. Eleanor spoke about her dreams for their potential future with the same practical honesty she applied to everything else. She wanted children if God blessed them with that gift, but she also wanted to contribute meaningfully to their community beyond traditional domestic roles. Samuel found himself sharing ambitions he had barely acknowledged even to himself. His bookkeeping skills could serve a larger population than Cedar Falls if he could establish his own accounting business. Eleanor's organizational abilities would make her an invaluable partner in such an enterprise, handling client relationships and business development while he focused on the technical aspects of financial management. The possibility of building something together, of creating a life based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than mere convenience, began to feel not only possible but probable. Eleanor's presence had transformed his boarding house room from a place of solitary refuge into the foundation of something larger and more meaningful. One evening, as they sat reading together by the fire, Eleanor looked up from her book and observed that she could no longer imagine returning to Missouri. The farm there held only memories now, while Cedar Falls offered the possibility of creating something new with someone who understood both her capabilities and her dreams. Samuel felt his heart leap at her words, though he maintained the careful composure that had become natural to him. He asked if she was certain, reminding her that their arrangement had been intended as a trial that could end without obligation on either side. Eleanor's smile held a warmth that reached her eyes as she replied that the best decisions often revealed themselves gradually rather than dramatically. The month they had agreed upon was nearly ended, but Samuel realized that the question of Eleanor staying had been answered not through any single moment of revelation but through the accumulation of daily compatibilities and shared satisfactions. They had discovered that their written connection had been accurate rather than illusory, a foundation solid enough to support the more complex structure of actual marriage. Winter was settling over Cedar Falls with its promise of long nights and cold mornings, but Samuel no longer faced the season alone. Eleanor's presence had brought warmth that extended beyond the physical comfort of shared space into the deeper satisfaction of genuine partnership and understanding. The proposal came not with grand gestures or romantic declarations, but on a quiet Tuesday evening as they worked together organizing the store's quarterly inventory. Eleanor was recording figures in her neat handwriting while Samuel calculated totals, their heads bent over ledgers in comfortable collaboration. Samuel looked up from his work and found Eleanor watching him with an expression he had never seen before, something gentle and certain that made his breath catch in his throat. She set down her pen and folded her hands in her lap, the gesture somehow formal despite their intimate surroundings. "I believe," she said quietly, "that we would make excellent partners in marriage as well as in work." The words were spoken without flourish or sentiment, but with the same careful honesty that had characterized everything else about their relationship. Samuel felt his heart respond not to romantic passion but to something deeper and more sustainable. He had planned to ask her himself, had rehearsed the words during his solitary walks around town, but Eleanor's direct approach suited them both better than any traditional courtship ritual. "Yes," he replied simply, knowing that elaborate promises would mean less to her than his steady presence in the days and years ahead. They were married the following Thursday in Reverend Mitchell's modest church, with Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Morrison serving as witnesses. Eleanor wore her best dress, a deep green wool that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes, while Samuel had his suit pressed and his boots polished to their finest shine. The ceremony was brief and practical, much like the couple themselves. Reverend Mitchell spoke about marriage as partnership rather than romantic fulfillment, choosing verses that emphasized mutual support and shared responsibility. Eleanor and Samuel exchanged simple gold bands that Samuel had ordered from the jeweler in the county seat, symbols of commitment that would last longer than passionate declarations. After the ceremony, Mrs. Patterson hosted a modest reception in her dining room, serving cake she had baked specially for the occasion and coffee that filled the small space with warmth against the December cold outside. The few guests offered congratulations with varying degrees of enthusiasm, some genuinely pleased for Samuel's happiness, while others remained puzzled by Eleanor's willingness to bind herself to a disabled man. Eleanor handled their reactions with the same composed grace she brought to everything else, thanking them for their attendance while making it clear through her manner that she considered herself fortunate rather than sacrificial in her choice of husband. Her confidence seemed to reassure the more skeptical observers, as though her certainty validated what they had questioned. The newlyweds spent their wedding night in the boarding house, having agreed to look for their own lodgings after the holidays when suitable properties might become available. Mrs. Patterson had tactfully arranged for them to have the best room, with a view of the snow-covered street and a fireplace that threw warm light across the simple furnishings. Samuel felt nervous in a way that had nothing to do with physical intimacy and everything to do with the profound shift in his circumstances. For years, he had lived with the assumption that marriage and family were beyond his reach, that his disability had placed such ordinary happiness permanently outside his grasp. Now Eleanor sat brushing her hair by the fire, her presence in his room transforming it from a solitary refuge into the beginning of shared life. They talked quietly as the fire burned low, not about passion or romance but about practical matters that would shape their future. Eleanor had ideas about establishing Samuel's accounting business, suggestions for attracting clients and managing expansion that revealed her understanding of both his capabilities and their community's needs. Samuel shared his own thoughts about building something lasting together, about creating a life that would provide security and satisfaction for both of them regardless of what physical challenges the years might bring. His injury had taught him that happiness could not depend on perfect health or conventional circumstances, that the most meaningful achievements often came from working within limitations rather than pretending they did not exist. Eleanor's hand found his in the firelight, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that spoke of partnership rather than romance. They were beginning something together that was based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than fleeting passion, something that might prove more durable than marriages built on sentiment alone. The snow continued falling outside their window as they planned their future, covering Cedar Falls in pristine white that made the familiar town look transformed and full of possibility. Samuel realized that his long search for acceptance had ended not with someone who overlooked his limitations but with someone who saw them clearly and chose him anyway, someone who understood that true strength often grew from acknowledging weakness rather than denying it. Winter was settling deep over their new life together, but Samuel felt only warmth as he contemplated the years ahead with Eleanor beside him, building something meaningful from the foundation of honesty and understanding they had established through careful letters and cautious hope. January brought challenges that tested the foundation Samuel and Eleanor had built during their careful courtship. The harsh winter weather made Samuel's leg ache constantly, leaving him moving more slowly and requiring his walking stick even for short distances around their new rooms above Henderson's bakery. Eleanor watched her husband struggle with the cold's effects on his old injury, her practical mind already working on solutions. She prepared hot compresses each evening and rearranged their furniture to minimize the walking required for his daily routines, small accommodations that Samuel initially resisted before accepting with grateful dignity. The real test came when word spread through Cedar Falls that Samuel intended to establish his own accounting practice. Several established businessmen expressed skepticism that a disabled man could handle the physical demands of traveling to client locations and managing multiple business relationships simultaneously. Mr. Thornberry, who owned the largest ranch in the county, visited Henderson's bakery specifically to observe Samuel's capabilities firsthand. His questions were pointed and barely polite, focused more on Samuel's limitations than his demonstrated expertise with financial management. Eleanor served coffee with unruffled composure while her husband answered each inquiry with patient professionalism. As winter winds howl around this little bakery where our couple faces these early challenges, I find myself wondering about the storms in your own corner of the world. Are you listening to this story while snow falls outside your window? Or perhaps during a warm evening in a distant climate? I'd love to know what season surrounds you as Samuel and Eleanor navigate theirs. After Thornberry left without committing to their services, Eleanor found Samuel staring out the window with an expression she had never seen before. The confidence that had sustained him through their courtship seemed shaken by direct confrontation with the community's doubts about his professional capabilities. Eleanor approached this crisis with the same methodical intelligence she applied to everything else. Rather than offering empty reassurance, she suggested they demonstrate Samuel's abilities through a different approach. She proposed that they begin by handling the accounts for smaller businesses, establishments whose owners might be more willing to give them a chance to prove their worth. Mrs. Chun, who ran the town's only laundry service, became their first client. Her books were a chaos of incomplete records and missing receipts that would have challenged any accountant, but Samuel's patient work revealed patterns of profit and loss that helped her understand her business for the first time. Eleanor's organizational skills transformed Mrs. Chen's record-keeping system into something simple enough for the proprietor to maintain herself. Word of their success with the laundry spread to other small business owners who had struggled with financial management. The baker, the seamstress, and the owner of the town's second boarding house all requested consultations that demonstrated Samuel's expertise while showcasing Eleanor's ability to explain complex concepts in practical terms. Samuel discovered that his disability, rather than hindering his work, actually enhanced his ability to connect with clients who felt marginalized by the business community's established hierarchy. Many small business owners had experienced their own forms of discrimination and appreciated working with someone who understood what it meant to be underestimated. Eleanor's role evolved beyond simple assistance into genuine partnership. Her natural ability to read people and situations complemented Samuel's technical expertise, allowing them to tailor their services to each client's specific needs and communication style. Together, they could offer something neither could have provided alone. The success of their small-scale practice gradually attracted attention from larger businesses that had initially dismissed Samuel's capabilities. Mr. Morrison, who had observed Samuel's work at the general store, recommended their services to several merchants who were impressed by the detailed reports and practical recommendations the couple provided. By February, Samuel and Eleanor had established a modest but growing practice that challenged the community's assumptions about both disabled workers and women's roles in business. Their partnership operated as smoothly in professional settings as it did in their personal life, each contributing strengths that compensated for the other's limitations. The physical challenges of Samuel's disability remained real and sometimes frustrating, but Eleanor's practical solutions and unwavering confidence in his abilities helped him navigate difficulties without allowing them to define his professional identity. She understood that supporting him meant acknowledging his struggles while refusing to treat them as insurmountable obstacles. Their evening conversations now included planning for business expansion, discussions about hiring additional help, and dreams of establishing an accounting firm that could serve the entire region. What had begun as a desperate search for personal acceptance had evolved into something larger, a professional partnership that benefited their entire community. Samuel realized that his long struggle with rejection had prepared him for this unexpected success in ways he was only beginning to understand. His experience with limitation and adaptation had taught him patience and creativity that served him well in solving other people's problems, skills that might never have developed if his life had followed a more conventional path. Winter's grip on Cedar Falls remained firm, but Samuel no longer dreaded the cold months that made his injury more painful. Eleanor's presence had transformed challenge into opportunity, isolation into partnership, and perceived weakness into unexpected strength that served both their marriage and their shared professional ambitions. March arrived with an unexpected complication that threatened everything Samuel and Eleanor had built together. A letter arrived from Missouri bearing the official seal of Eleanor's county courthouse, informing her that her grandmother's farm had been sold for unpaid taxes and that she was entitled to claim the remaining proceeds after debts were settled. The amount was substantial enough to change their circumstances completely. Eleanor could return to Missouri with sufficient funds to purchase a better property, or she could remain in Cedar Falls with financial security that would eliminate many of the practical concerns that had shaped their careful courtship and early marriage. Samuel read the letter with growing unease, though he tried to keep his expression neutral as Eleanor absorbed the implications. For the first time since her arrival, she had genuine alternatives to their life together, options that did not depend on his limited earning potential or her willingness to overlook his physical limitations. Eleanor folded the letter carefully and placed it on their small dining table, her face revealing nothing of her thoughts. Samuel waited for her to speak, his heart hammering with fears he had thought resolved months ago. The old insecurities returned with renewed force, whispering that no woman would choose him if she had other viable options. The silence stretched between them until Eleanor finally looked up with eyes that held something Samuel could not immediately interpret. She asked what he thought she should do, her voice carrying none of the certainty that usually characterized her speech. For the first time since he had known her, Eleanor seemed genuinely uncertain about the best course forward. Samuel forced himself to answer honestly despite the pain it caused him. She should consider all her options, he said, including the possibility that returning to Missouri might offer her opportunities that Cedar Falls could never provide. Their marriage had been built on practical considerations as much as affection, and those considerations had fundamentally changed with this unexpected inheritance. Eleanor studied his face with the same careful attention she brought to business problems, seeming to weigh his words against something she observed in his expression. She asked if he wanted her to leave, if he thought their marriage had been a mistake now that she had other choices available to her. The question struck Samuel like a physical blow, revealing fears he had tried to suppress even from himself. He admitted that he had always wondered if Eleanor had chosen him primarily because she had few other options, and that her inheritance forced him to confront the possibility that she might prefer a different life if given the chance to choose freely. Eleanor's response surprised him with its gentle firmness. She reminded him that she had already made her choice freely, had proposed to him herself rather than waiting for him to ask. Her decision to marry him had not been born of desperation but of recognition that they could build something meaningful together. The inheritance, she continued, simply provided them with resources to build their shared future more quickly and securely than they had originally planned. She suggested using the money to establish Samuel's accounting practice on a larger scale, perhaps purchasing office space and hiring assistants who could help him serve a broader clientele without straining his physical capabilities. Samuel felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen as he absorbed Eleanor's words. She was not considering leaving him but rather planning ways to strengthen what they had already begun together. Her certainty helped quiet the doubts that had plagued him since childhood, the persistent fear that he was fundamentally unworthy of lasting love and commitment. They spent the evening discussing practical applications for Eleanor's inheritance, transforming what had initially seemed like a threat to their marriage into an opportunity for expansion and growth. Eleanor's business instincts suggested several ways to invest the money that would benefit not only their own enterprise but also the broader Cedar Falls community. Samuel's expertise with financial planning complemented Eleanor's entrepreneurial vision, allowing them to develop strategies that balanced ambition with prudent risk management. Their conversation reminded him why their partnership worked so well, how their different strengths created possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. The inheritance also opened discussions about their personal future in ways they had previously avoided. Eleanor spoke tentatively about her hope for children, acknowledging that Samuel's disability might complicate pregnancy and child-rearing in ways they would need to address together if God blessed them with that responsibility. Samuel shared his own dreams of fatherhood alongside his fears about passing on his limitations or failing to provide adequate protection for a family. Eleanor's practical approach to these concerns, her willingness to discuss potential challenges without being overwhelmed by them, reassured him that they could face whatever difficulties arose with the same methodical partnership that had served them in business. By the time they prepared for sleep, the inheritance had transformed from a source of anxiety into confirmation of their mutual commitment. Eleanor's choice to invest her unexpected windfall in their shared future spoke louder than any romantic declaration could have done, proving that her attachment to him was based on genuine partnership rather than mere convenience. Spring was approaching Cedar Falls with its promise of renewal and growth, and Samuel realized that their marriage had weathered its first serious test by growing stronger rather than more fragile. Eleanor's inheritance would provide security, but more importantly, her response to this opportunity had demonstrated the depth of her commitment to their life together. By April, Samuel and Eleanor had transformed the inheritance from an unexpected windfall into the foundation of something remarkable. They purchased a small building on Main Street that had formerly housed a failed millinery shop, converting the front room into professional offices while maintaining their living quarters in the comfortable space above. The Hartwell Accounting Services sign that hung above their door represented more than a business venture. It symbolized their joint determination to create something lasting and valuable for their community. Eleanor had insisted on including Samuel's name alone on the sign, understanding that his professional credibility depended on being recognized as the primary expertise behind their services. Samuel's client base had grown to include most of the small businesses in Cedar Falls and several larger operations from neighboring towns. His reputation for accuracy and practical advice had spread beyond the initial skepticism about his disability, earning him respect based purely on the quality of his work and the tangible improvements his clients experienced in their financial management. Eleanor's role had evolved into something unprecedented for a woman in their community. While she maintained the careful discretion that social expectations required, her intelligence and business acumen had become indispensable to their operation. She handled client communications, managed scheduling, and developed organizational systems that increased their efficiency dramatically. The success of their partnership had begun attracting attention from business owners in larger towns who were impressed by the detailed reports and innovative solutions the Hartwells provided. Samuel found himself consulting on financial problems that challenged his expertise in satisfying ways, while Eleanor's strategic insights helped their clients identify opportunities they might have otherwise overlooked. One particularly significant client was Judge Harrison, whose complex estate planning required Samuel's most sophisticated accounting skills. The judge had initially expressed reservations about working with a disabled accountant, but Eleanor's professional correspondence and Samuel's thorough analysis of his financial situation had overcome those prejudices completely. Samuel discovered that his experience with limitation and adaptation had actually enhanced his ability to solve complex problems creatively. Where other accountants might rely on standard approaches, his necessity to work within physical constraints had taught him to find innovative solutions that often proved more effective than conventional methods. Eleanor's contribution extended beyond business support into genuine intellectual partnership. Her questions and observations frequently led Samuel to insights he might not have reached independently, while her ability to communicate complex financial concepts in accessible terms had become crucial to their client relationships. Their personal relationship had deepened alongside their professional success. The daily collaboration required by their business had revealed layers of compatibility that their careful courtship had only begun to explore. They had learned to anticipate each other's thoughts and compensate for each other's weaknesses with an efficiency that felt natural rather than forced. Samuel's health had actually improved since their marriage, not because his disability had lessened, but because Eleanor's practical support had eliminated many of the daily stresses that had previously aggravated his condition. Her matter-of-fact accommodations for his limitations had freed him to focus his energy on work that utilized his strengths rather than constantly battling his weaknesses. The inheritance had also allowed them to hire Martha Weber, a young woman whose family had fallen on hard times, to help with the clerical work that was becoming too much for Eleanor to handle alone. Martha's gratitude for the opportunity had made her an enthusiastic and capable assistant who freed both Samuel and Eleanor to focus on the more complex aspects of their growing practice. Their success had gradually changed the community's perception of both disability and women's capabilities. Samuel's professional achievements had demonstrated that physical limitations need not prevent meaningful contribution, while Eleanor's obvious competence in business matters had challenged assumptions about women's intellectual capabilities. Judge Harrison had become not only a client but something approaching a friend, often stopping by their office to discuss legal and financial matters that required their combined expertise. His respect for their professional abilities had opened doors to other prominent clients who might otherwise have dismissed Samuel's capabilities based on his physical appearance. The spring weather had brought relief from the winter aches that always plagued Samuel's injured leg, allowing him to work longer hours and travel more comfortably to client meetings. Eleanor had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when his pain was increasing, adjusting their schedule accordingly without making him feel diminished by his limitations. Their evening conversations now included discussions of expanding their practice beyond Cedar Falls, perhaps establishing satellite offices in other towns where their services were increasingly in demand. The dreams they had shared tentatively during their courtship had evolved into concrete plans supported by proven success and growing financial security. Samuel realized that his long search for acceptance had led him not merely to personal happiness but to professional fulfillment that benefited their entire community. Eleanor's partnership had transformed his perceived weaknesses into actual strengths, creating opportunities neither could have imagined when they first began their careful correspondence months ago. May brought news that would test everything Samuel and Eleanor had built together in ways neither had anticipated. A letter arrived from the territorial capital offering Samuel a position as chief accountant for the Regional Banking Commission, a prestigious appointment that would require relocating to Denver and managing financial oversight for multiple counties. The salary offered was more than triple what their private practice generated, and the position represented recognition of Samuel's expertise at the highest levels of territorial government. Judge Harrison had recommended him for the role, citing both his technical competence and his innovative approaches to complex financial problems. Samuel read the offer twice before showing it to Eleanor, his emotions complicated by pride, excitement, and uncertainty. The position would vindicate every doubt that had been raised about his professional capabilities while providing financial security beyond anything they had imagined possible. Yet accepting would mean abandoning the business they had built together and the community that had finally learned to value their contributions. Eleanor studied the letter with her characteristic careful attention, asking practical questions about the duties involved and the expectations for the position holder's wife. The territorial capital was a sophisticated city where social requirements and professional entertaining would play important roles in Samuel's success, responsibilities that would demand skills neither of them had developed in Cedar Falls. As these life-changing possibilities unfold in their quiet office where so many dreams have taken shape, I find myself wondering about the crossroads moments in your own life. Whether you're listening to this story during a peaceful morning or a reflective evening wherever you are in the world, I'm curious what time it is in your part of our global community as Samuel and Eleanor face this pivotal decision together. The opportunity represented everything Samuel had thought impossible when he first began writing to mail-order brides, seeking only acceptance and companionship. Now he was being offered professional recognition at the territorial level, validation that his disability had not prevented him from achieving genuine expertise in his field. Eleanor's response surprised him with its thoughtful complexity. She recognized the honor inherent in the offer while also understanding the challenges it would present for both of them. Denver society would expect a chief accountant's wife to possess social skills and cultural refinements that her practical education had not provided, and Samuel would need to navigate political complexities far more demanding than their small-town client relationships. They spent several days discussing the implications before Eleanor suggested a different perspective entirely. Rather than viewing the offer as something to accept or reject, she proposed that Samuel use it as leverage to negotiate something better suited to their actual desires and capabilities. Samuel could decline the Denver position while proposing to establish a regional accounting office in Cedar Falls, serving multiple counties without relocating to the territorial capital. His proven success with local businesses and the infrastructure they had already built would support such an arrangement, while allowing them to maintain the life they had created together. The audacity of Eleanor's suggestion initially overwhelmed Samuel, but her logical presentation gradually convinced him that such a counterproposal might actually appeal to the Territorial Commission. A regional office would provide better service to rural communities while costing less than maintaining staff in the expensive capital city. Samuel drafted his response with Eleanor's help, declining the Denver appointment while outlining his alternative proposal in detail. He emphasized the advantages of decentralized service delivery and his established relationships with businesses throughout the region, presenting his counteroffer as a more effective solution to the Commission's needs. The waiting period that followed tested their confidence in ways the original decision had not. They had chosen to risk a certain opportunity for an uncertain possibility, betting their future on Eleanor's strategic insight and Samuel's demonstrated competence. During those anxious weeks, their daily routine continued with its familiar rhythms, but conversations often returned to speculation about the Commission's response. Samuel found himself alternating between excitement about the possibilities Eleanor had envisioned and regret about potentially sacrificing a guaranteed path to financial security and professional recognition. Eleanor maintained her characteristic calm during this period, continuing to manage their existing practice with steady competence while researching the legal and logistical requirements for establishing a regional office. Her confidence in their decision helped Samuel resist the temptation to send a second letter accepting the original Denver offer. Martha Weber had become increasingly valuable during this uncertain time, handling routine tasks that allowed Samuel and Eleanor to focus on strategic planning and client relationships that would be crucial regardless of how the Territorial Commission responded to their proposal. The spring weather had brought renewed energy to Cedar Falls, and Samuel often walked the familiar streets in the evenings, reflecting on how much had changed since Eleanor's arrival 6 months earlier. His life had transformed from solitary resignation to active partnership, from limited expectations to ambitious dreams he would never have dared imagine alone. Their marriage had evolved through each challenge into something stronger and more complex than either had anticipated during their careful courtship. Eleanor's practical wisdom and unwavering confidence had taught Samuel to see his capabilities rather than his limitations, while his steady competence had provided the foundation for her own professional ambitions. Whatever response came from the territorial capital, Samuel realized that he and Eleanor had already achieved something remarkable together. They had built a partnership based on mutual respect and shared dreams, creating professional success while maintaining the personal connection that had drawn them together through careful letters and cautious hope. The response from the Territorial Commission arrived on a Thursday morning in early June, carried by special courier rather than regular mail. Samuel's hands trembled slightly as he broke the official seal, while Eleanor watched from across their office with careful attention to his expression as he read the formal document. The Commission had accepted his counterproposal. More than accepted, they had embraced it with enthusiasm that surprised both Samuel and Eleanor. The territorial governor himself had endorsed the concept of regional service centers, authorizing Samuel to establish the Western Colorado Regional Accounting Office with a budget that exceeded their most optimistic projections. Samuel would serve as regional director, overseeing not only Cedar Falls but 5 surrounding counties, with authority to hire additional accountants and establish satellite offices as needed. The salary was nearly equal to what the Denver position had offered, but without requiring them to abandon the life they had built together in their small community. Eleanor's strategic insight had transformed what initially seemed like a choice between personal happiness and professional advancement into an opportunity that enhanced both. Her ability to envision possibilities beyond the obvious options had opened doors neither had known existed when they first began their careful correspondence. The Commission's letter outlined ambitious plans for expanding financial services throughout the territory, recognizing that rural communities had been underserved by traditional banking and accounting practices. Samuel's proven success with small businesses made him ideal for developing programs that would support economic growth in developing regions. Within weeks of receiving official authorization, Samuel and Eleanor found themselves managing a transformation that affected the entire Cedar Falls community. Their expanded office required additional space, leading them to purchase the adjoining building and hire 3 junior accountants along with Martha Weber, who had proven herself invaluable as their practice grew. Eleanor's role evolved into something unprecedented for a woman in their territory. While she maintained appropriate discretion about her influence, her strategic planning and organizational skills had become essential to the regional office's operation. The Commission's correspondence increasingly addressed both Samuel and Eleanor, acknowledging her contributions without formally recognizing them. The success of their expansion validated every risk they had taken together. Samuel's expertise with complex financial problems attracted clients from throughout the region, while Eleanor's systematic approach to service delivery ensured that each account received the attention necessary for meaningful improvement in their business operations. Judge Harrison had become one of their strongest supporters, often referring colleagues from other counties to the Hartwell office when they needed specialized financial consulting. His initial skepticism about Samuel's disability had transformed into genuine respect for both Samuel's professional competence and Eleanor's business acumen. The regional office employed 12 people by autumn, making it one of the largest businesses in Cedar Falls and significantly contributing to the town's economic growth. Samuel took pride in providing opportunities for other residents who had previously struggled to find meaningful work, including 2 other veterans whose war injuries had limited their employment options. Eleanor discovered particular satisfaction in mentoring young women who showed aptitude for business, teaching them skills that might lead to opportunities beyond traditional domestic roles. Her influence was subtle but significant, gradually expanding expectations for what women might accomplish in their community. Their personal relationship had deepened through the challenges of rapid professional growth. Managing a complex organization required constant communication and mutual trust that strengthened their partnership in ways their quiet courtship could never have achieved. They had learned to rely on each other completely, combining their strengths to handle situations that would have overwhelmed either working alone. Samuel's confidence had grown alongside their professional success, but more importantly, he had learned to see his disability as one characteristic among many rather than the defining feature of his identity. Eleanor's consistent faith in his abilities had taught him to focus on what he could accomplish rather than what he could not, transforming limitation into motivation for creative problem-solving. The Territorial Commission had begun consulting Samuel on policy matters affecting rural economic development, seeking his insights based on direct experience with the challenges facing small communities. His recommendations influenced legislation that improved access to financial services throughout the territory, extending his impact far beyond Cedar Falls. Eleanor's inheritance had provided the initial capital for their expansion, but their success now generated sufficient income to invest in additional growth opportunities. They discussed opening offices in neighboring territories, potentially building a network that would serve the entire Mountain West region. Their evening conversations had evolved from careful explorations of compatibility to detailed planning sessions for ambitious projects that would benefit thousands of people across multiple states. The dreams they had shared tentatively during their courtship had expanded into concrete plans, supported by proven success and growing recognition. Samuel realized that his long struggle with rejection and limitation had prepared him for this unexpected success in ways he was still discovering. Every challenge he had overcome had taught him skills that now served not only his own ambitions but also the broader community that depended on his expertise and Eleanor's strategic vision for building something lasting and meaningful together. 1 year after Eleanor's arrival in Cedar Falls, Samuel stood at the window of their expanded office watching the morning bustle of Main Street below. The town had grown considerably since their accounting practice had attracted businesses and families seeking opportunities in a community known for its progressive attitudes toward capability over convention. Eleanor approached from behind, her hand settling naturally on his shoulder as she joined him in observing the changes they had helped create. Her condition was beginning to show now, the gentle curve of pregnancy that would bring their first child in the early months of next year, a development that had surprised and delighted them both. The morning light revealed familiar faces moving about their daily business, but also newcomers drawn by the economic opportunities that the regional office had generated. Samuel's expertise had attracted companies that brought employment and prosperity to Cedar Falls, while Eleanor's organizational innovations had been adopted by businesses throughout the territory. Martha Weber had married young Dr. Collins the previous month, a union that Samuel and Eleanor had quietly encouraged by ensuring the two met during one of the doctor's visits to treat Samuel's occasional struggles with winter weather. Their matchmaking had been subtle but successful, adding another happy partnership to the community they continued to nurture. As we reach the end of the story about love finding a way despite every obstacle, I'm curious about the love stories unfolding in your own life. Whether you're listening during a quiet morning coffee or settling in for a peaceful evening wherever you are in our world, I'd love to know what time it is in your corner of the globe as we conclude Samuel and Eleanor's journey together. The Territorial Commission had recently approved Samuel's proposal for a training institute that would teach accounting and business management skills to young people throughout the region. Eleanor would oversee the program's development, her unofficial but essential role finally receiving formal recognition through her appointment as Director of Educational Services. Their success had rippled far beyond their original dreams, creating opportunities for dozens of other people who might otherwise have struggled to find meaningful work. Samuel's insistence on hiring based on capability rather than conventional expectations had established Cedar Falls as a community where talent was valued regardless of physical limitations or social prejudices. Judge Harrison had become more than a client, serving as an unofficial advisor whose legal expertise complemented their business acumen. His initial reluctance to work with the disabled accountant had transformed into deep respect for both Samuel's professional abilities and Eleanor's strategic vision, leading him to recommend their services to colleagues throughout the territorial government. Eleanor's pregnancy had been proceeding smoothly despite her concerns about managing the physical demands while maintaining their growing business obligations. Samuel's protective instincts had intensified, but he had learned to express them through practical support rather than limiting restrictions that would diminish Eleanor's sense of accomplishment and independence. They had received letters from other couples who had heard about their unconventional courtship and successful partnership, seeking advice about building marriages based on mutual respect rather than traditional romantic expectations. Samuel and Eleanor had begun responding to these inquiries, sharing insights about the importance of honest communication and shared goals in creating lasting relationships. The regional office now employed 23 people, making it the largest business in Cedar Falls and a significant contributor to the territorial tax base. Samuel took particular pride in providing opportunities for other veterans whose disabilities had previously limited their employment options, demonstrating that physical limitations need not prevent meaningful contribution to community prosperity. Eleanor's influence on women's opportunities had been equally significant, though necessarily more subtle given social expectations about female participation in business. Several young women had learned skills in their office that led to positions with other companies, gradually expanding the range of work considered appropriate for capable women throughout the territory. Their evening walks around town had become opportunities to observe the changes their presence had created in Cedar Falls. New businesses, growing families, and increased prosperity provided tangible evidence that their partnership had benefited far more people than themselves alone, justifying every risk they had taken together. Samuel's disability no longer defined his identity in his own mind or in community perception. His walking stick remained necessary for balance and support, but it had become simply one tool among many that he used to accomplish his goals rather than a symbol of limitation that restricted his possibilities. The child growing within Eleanor represented hopes that extended beyond their personal happiness into dreams of raising someone who would understand from birth that worth was measured by character and contribution rather than physical perfection or social convention. Their son or daughter would grow up seeing capability valued above conformity. As autumn settled over Cedar Falls with its promise of winter challenges and spring renewals, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought him from desperate loneliness to profound partnership. Eleanor's arrival had transformed not only his personal circumstances, but his entire understanding of what was possible when two people committed to building something meaningful together. Their love story would continue evolving through whatever challenges and opportunities the years ahead might bring, but its foundation had been established through honest correspondence, practical partnership, and mutual determination to create something lasting from the raw materials of hope and careful trust that had brought them together across the distance between Missouri and Colorado.